Today's video is about a love story. Well, kind of. In 2012, Nebraska police detectives got a case that seemed pretty straightforward, but it quickly unraveled into a giant web of mystery, and essentially it was unsolvable for about 4 years, until they got a break in the case from a source that nobody expected. But before we get into that, if you're a fan of dark storytelling or true crime, then I want you to go ahead and consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel right now, because that's what we do. Without further ado, let's get into it. Dave Kroupa was just a normal guy. He was divorced and a single father living in Omaha, Nebraska. And after his relationship with the mother of his children ended, he wasn't looking to settle down again. He worked as a mechanic and managed an auto body shop. And when he started dating again in 2012, he was pretty upfront about what he wanted. Nothing serious, something casual, and with no strings attached. And that's what he thought he was getting when he met Shanna Golyar through an online dating site, and the two began to see each other. At first, it was pretty hot and heavy, and, well, fun, which was exactly what Dave wanted. But it quickly became apparent that they weren't looking for exactly the same thing. Dave wanted to keep things light due to his recent separation, while Shanna apparently wanted something more serious. Despite this, they continued to see each other on and off, but at the same time, Dave started to date other women. And eventually, one of those women would completely change the course of both of their lives. Her name was Cari Farver. Cari was 37 years old, a single mother. She worked as a computer programmer. She first crossed paths with Dave when she brought her Ford Explorer into the auto shop that he managed. Dave was immediately attracted to her, and he took his chances by asking her out, and the two hit it off almost immediately. Somewhere into their relationship, Dave's feelings were beginning to change. She owned her own home. She was very bright and cheery, and also motivated. So Dave thought that there could be a potential long-term thing there. But from the very first date, there were some red flags. While out on this first date with Cari eating at a restaurant, Dave's phone begins to blow up with texts from Shanna. But since Dave was out on a date with another woman, he ignores the texts. The date with Cari goes pretty good, and he asked her back to his apartment. At his apartment, things begin to get intimate, but then unexpectedly, he gets a knock at his front door. He looks through the peephole. It's Shanna. She had just showed up uninvited. But what did she want? She had come over to pick up some of her belongings that she had left there since they were sleeping together on and off. So Dave has to reluctantly explain the awkward situation to Cari. Shanna was apparently the one that was upset and crying, but Cari wasn't particularly bothered by it, and she just decided to call it a night and she went home. As she leaves, the two women pass each other in the hallway, meaning that both women now knew exactly who the other one was and the situation that Dave was playing. Over the next couple of weeks, Dave continued to see them both. Cari was becoming the woman he was spending more of his time with, and he was getting more serious with her. On November 12th of that very same year, Cari started a work project that required her to be closer to Omaha. So Dave decided to offer to let her stay at his apartment for about a week. The first night, things went pretty good. Then the next day, on November 13th, Dave left for work around 6:20 a.m., leaving Cari behind, again thinking things were all good. But a couple hours later, he received a text from Cari, and it completely caught him off guard. Cari asked if she could move in with him. Dave was surprised because he and Cari had agreed to keep the relationship casual. So Dave replied no. And about 20 seconds later, the tone changed because Cari started sending a whirlwind of angry breakup messages. Message after message filled up his inbox, each one more angry than the last. She told him that she hated him and that she was seeing someone else, and she never wanted to see him again. By the time Dave returned to his apartment, Cari was gone. and so were all of her belongings. At first glance, this entire situation probably looked like an incredibly strange way for a relationship to end. Dave was sad, but he kind of just did the only thing that he could do. He just moved on. A bit of time goes by with nothing further, and then Cari started contacting Dave again. And this time, she wasn't just angry, she was becoming threatening. They went from text only to text and emails, from just a few here and there to sometimes several dozens in a single day, and sometimes even more. Messages were coming in as fast as Dave could block the numbers, and then she just messaged him from new numbers and created new fake emails. Then things escalated even more, because now Shanna was receiving messages too. Then someone broke into Shanna's garage. They stole her checkbook with the checks inside, they vandalized her vehicle, and they spray painted a pretty hateful message on her garage wall, saying "whore" from Dave. She reported it to police and even showed them the text messages from Cari literally claiming the garage vandalism. Things were escalating for Dave too. He reported multiple incidents of vandalizing, and things were getting pretty scary. Cari threw a brick through his bedroom window. To make things worse, his kids sometimes stayed with him there. Later, she spray painted "Dave beats women" on the outside of his window at his auto body shop where he worked. And she even broke into his apartment, spray painting "Go away, whore" and slashing Shanna's clothing with a knife. And she even stole Dave's handgun. And each and every time, Cari would claim it, so there was really no question about it. The tone in the text message suggested that Cari was deranged. Messages suggesting that they were being stalked and constantly watched. Threats, vandalism, break-ins. If Cari was willing to break into houses, then it suggests that Cari was fully capable of becoming physically violent. Violent towards Dave, violent towards Shanna, violent towards even Dave's kids. Things culminated when Cari set Shanna's house on fire. 2 dogs, a cat, and a pet snake died in the blaze, with Cari yet again taking responsibility. Of course, police were contacted and statements were made by Shanna and Dave, but police could not locate Cari. Through the investigation, they learned that Cari's own mother had already reported her missing. Nobody who actually knew Cari had seen her since the morning she disappeared from Dave's apartment. Her phone and social media accounts seemed to indicate that she was alive, or that someone was trying to make people think she was. Nonetheless, the harassment continued for months, and then years. But here's where things start to get pretty twisted. One day, while Shanna is in Big Lake Park in Council Bluffs, she calls 911, claiming an unknown woman had approached her and shot her in the left thigh. Shanna ends up surviving the gunshot, but she tells police that the woman ran away through the park. So, police search for the supposed shooter, including the utilization of a helicopter. Shanna reported to police later that she knew the woman. The attacker was a woman named Amy Flora, who was Dave's ex-girlfriend and the mother of his 2 kids. However, a few days prior to the shooting, Shanna had gone to police, claiming that Amy had been harassing her through text message. She also claimed, without evidence, that Amy was the one behind the entire years-long cyberstalking. She was also the one impersonating Cari and stalking everyone, and claimed that Amy had a gun that was stolen from Dave's house. The gun was a 9mm Smith & Wesson handgun, and that little detail was what started to flip the investigation. It stopped detectives dead in their tracks. How could Shanna know the model of the gun stolen from Dave? A handgun? Sure, but the model? They questioned her about it, and her answer as to how she knew the model of the gun that was stolen from Dave was vague and evasive, and it gave detectives the indication that she was lying. It was at that point that the investigation flipped, and they started to take a deeper look into Shanna. Then, the next dramatic escalation. The very next day, Shanna called 911, reporting that she was shot in the leg at Big Lake Park. She claimed that Amy had shot her. So they run their investigation and they conclude that Shanna is probably lying. She probably shot herself and she's trying to frame Amy. So why is Shanna trying to frame the mother of Dave's children? The investigation probably would have ended with that, but Shanna wouldn't give up, and investigators realized that Shanna was desperately wanting them to investigate Amy. With no evidence of Amy and suspecting that Shanna is behind it, they pretended to believe Shanna's story. They essentially told her that if she could get evidence that Amy Flora was responsible, then they would build a case against her. And Shanna fell for it. She began sending investigators supposed messages from Amy. First, Amy admits to shooting Shanna in the park, then indicates that she murdered Cari, something that was completely new to investigators because at this point in time, Cari was just a missing person committing cyberstalking and vandalism. Investigators would push Shanna to get more evidence, and then, as if by magic, Amy would admit through text message to stabbing Cari 3 times in the car. That last little detail is particularly important because it gave detectives a location to investigate as a murder scene. They had already searched Cari's car twice before and found nothing, but they wanted another shot at it because now it was a potential murder scene. So they went back again to Cari's Ford Explorer, and this time they removed the passenger seat fabric, and there, embedded into the foam padding, they found Cari's blood. They were also able to identify a fingerprint on a container of mints in the center console, and that print belonged to Shanna. Now investigators knew something that they hadn't been able to prove for years. Cari wasn't just simply a missing person. She was almost certainly dead. And if Cari was dead, that meant that every message, email, fake profile, and act of harassment supposedly coming from her had been created by someone else. And the detectives were now convinced that Shanna had been the one who killed Cari, and that she had shot herself in the park while trying to pin both the shooting and the murder of Cari on Dave's ex, Amy. So they finally arrested Shanna. But investigators would soon uncover even more evidence that Shanna had been far more involved in Cari's life than anyone realized. They tracked purchases made on Cari's debit card after her disappearance. Among the purchases was a floral pattern curtain. The exact curtain was found inside of Shanna's apartment. It was a strange and personal detail because it suggested that Shanna wasn't just impersonating Cari online. She was actively using her identity in the real world. About a year later, as the investigation expanded, while preparing for trial in February of 2017, forensic detectives examined a tablet that Dave had given them. The tablet had a micro SD card on it, a memory card. The card appeared to be empty, but a forensic computer examiner recovered more than 13,000 deleted photographs. The card had previously been used in Shanna's LG phone. They knew this because 458 of the photos on the card were also present on Shanna's phone. Buried among thousands of deleted photos was one photo, obscure enough that if you blink, you'd miss its importance. A dimly lit picture of a tattoo. Closer examination was that the tattoo was on a foot, and a picture of another tattoo appeared. Tattoos identified to belong to Cari. Why would Shanna have them? Perhaps she took a picture of them to try to figure out how to remove the tattoos to stop the identification process if her body was ever discovered. But this is just a theory because Shanna would never admit to anything, and the location of Cari's body was never discovered. However, despite the mountainous obstacle of having no body ever recovered, prosecutors were still able to build a case showing that Shanna Golyar had murdered Cari Farver and then spent years impersonating her and creating the illusion that she was still alive. In December of 2016, 4 years after Cari disappeared, Shanna Golyar was finally arrested and charged with first-degree murder. She would ultimately be convicted of that first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. And perhaps the most disturbing part of the entire case was that Cari's disappearance hadn't ended with just her death. Shanna impersonated her for years before trying to pin the entire cyber stalking and Cari's murder on Amy, the mother of Dave's kids, by staging a fake shooting in a park where she actually went as far as to shoot herself with the gun that she stole from Dave's house. And that's going to do it for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. If you made it this far and you enjoyed the story, do me a favor and hit the like button, as well as subscribe to the channel, and drop me a comment. Let me know what you thought about the story. Also, feel free to take a look around on the channel, find more stories just like this. See ya.